Hello and welcome to Backyard Catch. This is Nick Roby. Thanks for joining me once again. We had a full fun week of week one in college football, and we've got much more coming for you in week two. A lot to unpack. Super excited. You can feel that little fall crisp in the air, depending on where you are in the country. Just that little taste, just like, man, football's coming. The NFL starting this weekend. So, if you're a football fan, this is the time of year for you. So super excited. Yeah, a lot to get into. And so let's get right onto it with some fun picks for this weekend. Some big games going on. The biggest one is with College Game Day and with a big noon kickoff, both heading up to Ann Arbor, Michigan to have Texas and Michigan facing off in this awesome non-conference matchup. This one's really interesting because Texas took care of business pretty well in their game. It really wasn't much. It's just they looked like a pretty fine-tuned machine on offense, whereas Michigan at home, you could say, kind of struggled a little bit with a Fresno State team before pulling away at the end. Didn't quite cover the spread, but Michigan, it'll be really interesting to see, and that's what's really interesting about these week one matchups, right? Like the first game, you have some teams, who look really good against an inferior opponent, and you have some other teams that get a little bit slower to start. And what does this offense look like? Or what does this team look like going into this? And so when you have those two types of teams, you had some teams like a Georgia or a Clemson face off in the big, opener. And then you have a lot of teams who face, a smaller opponent, and no disrespect to them, but it's just to kind of get themselves going. And then this is like a really first test for these teams. So with Texas going to Michigan, this is really fun. Side note, I really do love that Texas and Michigan are playing at Michigan. There are some neutral sites which are fine, but college football to me, and it just, yeah, I know there are a lot of people who just really love just the home atmospheres, the pageantry. Ann Arbor is going to look awesome. Michigan's going to be ready to go. They're coming off their national title, wanting to show a lot. Texas is going to go into a place they don't usually go to. You have the SEC and Big Ten now facing off. It's just going to be fun. It's going to be awesome. Super excited for this one. This one's probably like the marquee matchup of the weekend. So really the interesting part of this is, will Texas was last week, really what they look like. How does Quinn Ewers look against this, a good Michigan defense? Granted, they've lost a lot of pieces, but what will they look like in this game? Whereas for Michigan, they lost a lot as well and really kind of struggle, especially offensively, against a Texas team who is pretty hungry. They're number 3 in the country. Michigan's 10. The big thing I was surprised at, it wasn't that the passing game wasn't as proficient. They went with actually a different guy at QB than I thought, but just guys like Donovan Edwards. Like I was just kind of expecting them to kind of be able to run the ball a little bit better than they did. I want to say the number I heard was like 2.9 a clip, per rush, which is just not going to get it done, especially for a team that usually is used to getting it done in the running game. So of course, whoever wins the line of scrimmage, like that's going to be the key. But I think there's two different styles of play. Like Texas is very quick, can be very explosive in the passing game. You have guys like Johnson in the defensive secondary for Michigan's going to have to play a great game. And Michigan, I feel like, is going to want to keep it more low scoring, want to control the ball, help their defense by controlling the ball on offense. Whoever can really establish their tempo, I think will be very important. I think it's more important for Michigan not to let the lead get too big too quickly, because if Texas is out to, a 2-touchdown lead quickly, I'm just not sure how, at least from what they showed last week and just how Michigan has tended to show themselves. I don't know if I like Michigan's chances in that way. However, if it's a close game, if they're causing some turnovers, if Texas is just kind of sputtering, not really getting going, then that's really feels like it plays more into Michigan's hands. So the line is 7 right now. And to me, that feels about right. I think, they are pretty good about getting these getting these picks. And so in picking this game, I really like Texas's offense. I know they're missing, you know, just 2 running backs right now and getting them all going. But Ewers just looks good. And I just don't know how much firepower Michigan has right now. And they could totally prove me wrong. But I like this Texas team. I think they're wanting to prove that they're for real. I think Steve Sarkisian is a really good play caller on offense. And I think just Michigan, I just have some concerns coming out of that that week 1 game. However, now Texas is here and they'll be ready to play. I don't have doubts about that, but man, I like Texas in this game. I think they can fit well, and I could see them kind of pulling away maybe about a 10 to 14 point range with this one. So really, really fun one. Another one just wanting to kind of hit on, might be flying under the radar a little bit, but just wanted to hit on this one as well. Georgia Tech travels to Syracuse. Georgia Tech is a 3-point favorite on the road. Georgia Tech, who wasn't talked about maybe as much in the offseason, now 23rd in the country. They're going on the road in the first true road game. And then they beat Florida State in a big win. And then they, take care of business against a Georgia State team who could be a little pesky, and you could see them kind of, falling on their laurels a little bit. Now they're ranked 23rd in the country. People are circling them, like Syracuse definitely will have their attention. So you have Syracuse with the transfer Kyle McCord. He transferred to Syracuse, played a great game week 1, but this will be a really big test with this. They're missing their star linebacker, Marlo Wax, who got hurt. I think he's out about 6 weeks, which is a little bit of concern for me. I know they're wanting to keep it a little simpler in offense, but offense looked great for Syracuse early. But Georgia Tech has been flying around, and I really like what Brent Key and boys are doing up there. Georgia Tech is a 3-point spread, and usually in these situations, I lean towards the home team. Syracuse is an underrated environment in the Dome, formerly known as the Carrier Dome. But it gets really loud in there. However, I think how Georgia Tech approached the game against Florida State, I don't foresee them being surprised by this. I think this will be closer. But and at first I was leaning Syracuse at home as typically lead a home underdog, but I just like this Georgia Tech team. I like what Haynes King and company are doing. They control the line of scrimmage really well, and defensively, I think they got after it pretty well. Syracuse missing their linebacker, I think, is kind of just what hit it for me, and I just think Georgia Tech will be able to run the ball a little bit better. And I think that they'll pull away in this one. So give me the Yellow Jackets in that one. Another big one is Iowa State and Iowa are playing in the battle for the Hawkeye State. Iowa is a 2.5-point favorite. This one's interesting because Iowa's been typically like a low-scoring offense. They actually scored like 28 points week 1. Iowa State, wanting to come in here, and they haven't won that many on the road. And so Iowa State has been like a good, a fun team. And, Matt Campbell will have those guys ready to play. But if the offense can look like it did with Iowa in the past, defensively they will do really well. It's tough for me. If this was at Iowa State, I would be leaning Iowa State more. But because it's at home for Iowa, their defense is always strong. They control, the field position game. They've gotten turnovers in the past. I just lean Iowa in this one. It's not a great feel in this type of game, but I lean Iowa for this one. Cal goes to Auburn in a traditional ACC SEC matchup in this one, but Cal's returning to the home and home in one of their first big long road trips. Auburn's a 13-point favorite, but I think Auburn's going to win. I think Cal's going to cover. I'm taking Cal plus 13, Auburn to win. I know Auburn looked really good last week, but it wasn't against a big opponent. Jaden Ott. If you don't know that name, know that name. He is the star running back from Cal. I think he helps them stay in this game because in the running game, they can chew up some clock, keep Auburn off the field a little bit. I can see Auburn maybe struggling a little bit more offensively than they did last week. And 13 just feels like a lot of points. I think this is more of like a 10 to 7 type of range. I think Auburn wins. It's, Auburn can be a tough place to play, especially when the crowd gets going. And I can see them winning in that. But don't Jaden Knott's a player, and I think Cal, they're going to want to prove some stuff. So I could see Cal kind of hanging around in this game. Colorado and Nebraska. This one is also a big game because last year, if you remember, this is the game where Deion Sanders and company really kind of took off when it came to getting just kind of the narrative going. They beat TCU, then they host Nebraska. They beat Nebraska, turned them over a bunch of times, and really just that train just kind of went going. Well, now Matt Rule's in another year. They have Dylan Raiola, the star freshman quarterback, who looks like people have been saying he looks like Pat Mahomes a little bit, which you can definitely see the resemblance. Colorado's going on the road this time. Nebraska's actually a 7.5 point favorite. So this is really interesting to me because Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, dude played really well last week, but they played against a North Dakota State team, and they took a last Hail Mary try from North Dakota State to win that ball game. And I felt like they were going to win, but they'll be really interesting to see, what part of this Nebraska team or the Colorado team can you really trust all the way, and yet what maybe is some parts they're still working on. I think, and then also with Nebraska, how much can we trust in this offense? It's a freshman quarterback. It's really his first real test of the year. I think Colorado just has a little bit too much firepower. They can strike really quickly, similar with Texas. Obviously not as strong, but they can hit really quick. Travis Hunter's a pesky player on defense. I could see Dylan Raiola turning the ball over a little bit, or just forcing a couple things. But I also think that Nebraska will be able to run the ball, or I could see them moving the ball continuously against Colorado. I think this will be a really good game. I think Nebraska pulls it out, but I think Colorado will cover, and this will be a fun one of the weekend. You could maybe see a couple weird things happen, but Colorado will definitely be in this game, and I'm taking Colorado the 7.5 in this one. We've got Clemson and App State is another one. If you didn't realize this, that Clemson, after coming off a tough game against Georgia, they get is it a get right game? Oh, you get fun G5 App State, who's been known to play teams really close and even beat some teams outright. North Carolina played them really close. Ask Texas A&M a couple years ago against Chase Bryce, used to be quarterback at Clemson. App State can play really tough. Clemson, they're going to want to improve a lot of things. I think Clemson was actually closer in hitting some plays than I think people realize. However, obviously the game got away from them. I'm not saying any of that. I just think I think Clemson is a few tweaks away from actually looking better than what they looked last week. However, App State is a tough opponent on the road. They're going to be ready to go. You don't want to let a team like that hang around. It's 17 points, which just feels like a little bit much, as a Clemson fan, a Clemson team, that's, my alma mater. Of course, I would like to see them win by more than that. I just think that's a really big ask, especially how the offense wasn't firing all cylinders last week, and against a pesky App State team, I could see this being maybe a little bit closer than that. But I think it's just App State's one of those games you fight and you win, and you're going to get their best effort and you win and you move on to the next week. It's just that type of game. I think they'll do it. I'm not predicting any kind of upset, but 17 is just a lot of points. I lean more to the 14 range, so I'm going to go Clemson wins, but App State covers in another Saturday night one. That, as people watching some other games, that's another interesting one to watch for as Clemson tries to get back on the right track. South Carolina goes to Kentucky in an SEC matchup on the road. South Carolina also had their hands full a little bit with a tough Old Dominion team. It was delayed a little bit by weather. They score a last-minute touchdown to win the game, but Old Dominion kind of hung around, and you have a Kentucky team who's been kind of flying under the radar, and it's at Kentucky. Kentucky's the 9.5. I like Kentucky, I think, to win at home, and I'm going to take Kentucky to cover that. I think the offense, it's the first true road game, for South Carolina, especially with a freshman quarterback. and only a second career start. I think that's a lot to ask. Kentucky's an underrated, tough place to play. You know that those guys will be ready to go. Mark Stoops and company, and they like to run the ball, control the clock. They played a tough one with Clemson last year in the bowl game. I just think I think Kentucky pulls this one out, and South Carolina's just trying to play catch up in this one throughout. And so I'm going to take Kentucky in that one. And then the final of one of the bigger games of the weekend, we have Tennessee playing NC State in Charlotte in a neutral site matchup. Tennessee looked really good against Chattanooga last week. Nico, I'm not even sure to pronounce his last name. He looks great. He looks locked in. I think Tennessee is just there should be in for a fun year, man. And NC State, man, they struggled a little bit more than I was expecting with Western Carolina. Like, they won the game, but Grayson McCall, it definitely could see like he's still trying to learn the offense. And I think we can get kind of tricked sometimes into forgetting that with these transfer quarterbacks, even with their upperclassmen, like it takes a little bit of time to get used to the guys. He clearly has a rapport with Concepcion, the star wide receiver, already, but they don't have a lot of targets going to anybody else, and Waters, the new running back, who's the Duke transfer, they need him to play well, I think. But if you're just throwing to one guy, I think Tennessee can lock that down. And so it's like in NC State, you really have to capitalize on the opportunities you have and don't let Tennessee, hit for the quick strikes. This is one of those interesting ones I was talking about earlier, to where, does the week one carry over? Like, is that narrative? Like, is that a little bit of more who you are? Or is that a week one and in this week two against a more equal opponent, like, we're going to find out a lot more information? I think we will find out a lot more, but it's in Charlotte. But I think you're going to see a strong contingent from Knoxville come. You're going to see a good contingent from NC State. I know for the ACC standpoint, like, they want NC State to do well. And I think for NC State, the door is open for them, especially with how Florida State, has struggled out of the gate, and how Clemson, did not come out all fire ceiling. Really, the only one who's come out all cylinders firing is Miami. So obviously, this is not a conference game, but it's important for NC State, with a lot of the goals that they have, and now with the automatic bid in the playoff, you just never know. So this is an important game to build the momentum and build that offense. For Tennessee, similar. I mean, you have Dogs in the fight for the SEC, but for Tennessee, like, you really want to get things going and have another good performance out of your team. But if Tennessee wins by the margin 7.5, if Tennessee wins that, I think you're going to see a lot of the hype train behind Tennessee, and just as they continue to get things rolling, going in the SEC, and maybe as a dark horse even to make it to Atlanta. NC State, if they get rolling, you're going to feel a lot better about their chances and them having a shot in Charlotte. I think for me, though, I'm going to go Tennessee minus 7.5. It's a neutral site, so you have that out of the way. I think Tennessee will have a good contingent there. I just really like this offense, man. They were impressive last week. I know it was Chattanooga, but they were impressive. I think Nico is the real deal, and it's going to be a lot of people learning about him. I think NC State's defense, while it still can be, I think will have, a pretty good year. I think they are missing some pieces from last year, and I think it's just hard to replace all of that. So with that being said, and I think NC State's offense, I think it was a little concerning for me, not seeing all the Christmas I would like to see. So I'm going to take Tennessee in that one. So that's some fun ones, man. Just to go recap, I've got Texas minus 7 at Michigan, Georgia Tech covering on the road. I've got Iowa winning at home against Iowa State, Nebraska winning, but Colorado covering the 7.5. Kentucky covering the 9.5 against South Carolina. Clemson winning, but App State covering about, maybe about a 14-point margin. And then I've got Tennessee winning, covering the 7.5 against NC State in Charlotte. Super pumped. Just a little rapid fire, just recap of all the different picks for this week. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. Super excited to break it down, all coming next week. Make sure you're subscribed on the YouTube channel. That really helps. The goal right now is we're trying to get to 500 subscribers. So you subscribe, tell your friends. It's a big helper for me. Opens up a lot more when it comes to YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed on podcasts. We're on Patreon. We are building a really fun community on there. It's going to be on Patreon. So it's on Discord if you want to be on Discord, or it's also on Twitter / good old X. And we'll have 2 different places for that. So if you want to be included in that, and that unlocks that with being a member of Patreon, and that really helps me out too, is to be able to continue to build content for you guys and continue to go, because right now it's a one-man process, and I super enjoy talking to y'all. But yeah, that really helps me out. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoy a great weekend of college football and some NFL. So hope you get some great time watching that and get some great time with your family and loved ones. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm signing off. I will talk to y'all next week.